Holy Spirit. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.
What does it mean to be rich towards God? Okay, I'll get it out of my system. Support your church. It's not what that homily's about. It's not what that gospel reading's about. Your church needs your support. Support it. Moving on. What does being rich towards God mean? Because it's kind of a strange concept. He's the God of the universe. He's the artificer of all creation. All that is would not be. It wouldn't was without God. So what does God need? How do you give anything to God? What could he possibly use from you? Wealth in and of itself, we have this shiny little metal called gold, and somehow we find it valuable. It's just a rock. It's just a metal. It's not even that pretty in many cases. It just shines nicely. It's valuable. It's dumb. We have cash. We give it value, but it's imaginary. We don't even use gold standard anymore. It's actually cloth, but it's papery. It's literally worth nothing. It has no intrinsic value of its own, and certainly not to God. What could God possibly need from you or from me? I racked my brain about that for years and years. How could I possibly give anything back to God? I'm, first of all, too busy sinning to really even give that much thought or much investment. There's a good word. I'm usually too distracted by my own selfishness to be rich towards God, to even think about it. What on earth or in heaven could I possibly do that would be of any value to God? God, think of it, it's God. He is the is of all ising. There is nothing he could possibly want. How could I be rich towards God? It begs the same question, or it's very much adjacent, or perhaps it's the very same thing as saying, how do I love God? How could I return or requite love to someone who loves so perfectly, who is love itself? I'm a fallen creature and I love myself more than anything. How could I even come close to loving God? It's almost silly if you think of it just in a superficial way. How could I love God? Well, we know very well that the Lord has told us we love God through loving others. Human relationship is the primary means by which we encounter Christ. We were made in his image in order to acquire his likeness. That's how we love God. We love each other. We experience humility and vulnerability towards each other. We make ourselves small so Christ can become great. This is how we love one another. It's through humility. The understanding of being rich towards God is pretty much the exact same thing. Humility, beauty, truth, and love. I say this all the time, but these are all the same thing. This is how we are rich towards God. How do we live a humble life and love each other properly so that we may love God, so that we may enter the kingdom of heaven? This is how we participate. This is what sets us apart, other than baptism, as citizens of the kingdom of heaven, is look how they love one another. That is what distinguished the Christians from anyone else in early Christian times. Look how they love each other. I think it was Tertullian. I have to go back. I'm always misattributing quotes, but I think it was Tertullian who was convinced of Christ because he saw how the Christians loved one another. Now, ultimately, yes, he was a heretic, but he also contributed many good things to Orthodox understanding of God, although he went too far and then he ultimately went off the ranch. But the original doorway for him into Christianity was, look how they love one another. Evidently, people didn't love each other very much before Christ. Can you imagine? I can. That was a long time ago. But evidently, the value of human life And if individual persons was regarded by what they owned or what they had or what they accomplished, and your value diminished the further down the social ladder you went. And at the end of the day, to kill someone was nothing, because human life wasn't valued. Then Christ comes along and turns everything on its head. Look how they love one another. Look how they sacrifice for each other. Look how everything belongs in common. And I'm not talking about socialism. That was a failed experiment. But look how they love each other. This was what set Christians apart. Think of it. It was simply love. If you were able to receive the email that I sent out yesterday, or seen the Facebook or social media posts, I put up a link yesterday to a live stream from Quedlinburg, Alaska, where they were uncovering the relics of Saint Olga, who has been buried in the village cemetery since, I think, 1978. But many of you have heard of and have venerated Saint Olga of Alaska, or Blessed Olga of Alaska. She's not officially canonized until this summer, but she shall be. It's almost like, well, you've decided to do it, hurry up and get on with it, because we want to be able to truly call her Saint Olga. But we know she's Saint Olga. And they were uncovering her relics. They dug down into the dirt and pulled her remains up out of the ground in order to lay them in a new casket and place them in the church in preparation for her glorification. Think of it. This was a humble nobody. This was just a village lady. She was a Yupik, Native American, Alaskan native from the Yupik people. Many of whom are my friends, by the way. It was cool to watch the live stream and see a bunch of my friends who are priests standing in her grave, digging out the dirt, shovel. Well, it wasn't dustpan full by dustpan full. What an experience I was watching. They will never forget that. What a life-changing experience to stand in her very grave with her remains. This is a holy place, more holy than many in most places. And why was she glorified? Why has the Holy Synod of the Orthodox Church in America resolved to canonize this holy woman? She was so darned ordinary. What distinguished her from any other lovely person in Quedlinburg, the little tiny village on the Kuskokwim River? It was the way she behaved. It is the way she lived her life. This was the primary example to most people of what true humility means, what richness towards God really is. This was a person whose richness towards God was so great that it has distinguished her among the people as Holy Saint Olga of Alaska, who has interceded so many times. The stories of her intercessions at the petition of people who have asked for her intercessions are legendary and long, and they could fill a book. She has interceded for people in such a way. And when she was alive, people in native Alaska, they are subsistence people. They live off the land, and they receive very little money. She was maybe a little bit better off because she was married to her husband, who was a priest, but he was also the postmaster. So he got a meager federal income, but that was probably not very much. They didn't have anything. They typically don't have anything in these places. But they are always very rich towards God. They're always I was telling somebody recently, actually a couple different somebodies at one time or another very recently, in Haiti, arguably the worst country in the world as far as having and having not. They literally live on nothing, and they have nothing, but they will give it away. And they're some of the happiest people on earth. They understand what richness towards God is. They understand humility and sacrifice and struggling together. That is also something that's well known about the Native Alaskan people. They struggle together. They have a community that is so rooted in each other that their very survival depends on the very act of being rich towards one another. Matushka Olga embodied richness towards God. It was something quite awesome to watch as they were removing the dirt that covered her for nearly, 46 years. I was, I think, a year old when she died. 46 years she's lain under the earth and has received the veneration of her people from that point. When she reposed in wintertime, just about a week ago, I think, was her feast day. The river was already well frozen. There was no traveling. But on the day of her funeral, the river thawed and people were able to make their way to the church to see her and sing her into eternity. Birds that are not present any longer for months were present and followed her casket to the grave. And as soon as she was in the ground and buried, the river began to freeze again. It remained thawed long enough for people who had come by boat down the Kuskokwim to depart and return to their villages. And then it froze again. The miracles were happening from the moment she reposed. She had nothing, but she gave everything away. She's famous for sewing gloves and hats and sweaters and things for people in the villages for warmth. She didn't have any means. She's famous for being a midwife and interceding for people where their children were dying and bringing their children from the brink of death to living again by her sacrifice of her time. She would travel distances to do that. We have the great blessing of having a new saint in our midst. And she's a saint because of the very thing that this gospel talks about. Her richness towards God. What could we give back to God? A life well lived in service to others. Sacrificing, struggling. And this is not really meant to be a proclamation of her distinct from anyone else. It is a proclamation to you and I that this humble, ordinary woman, it's ordinary. This is the key phrase here. She's ordinary. Just like you and me. We are extraordinary because look how we love one another. That's what sets us apart. That is what distinguishes us from others, is look how they love one another. She was ordinary. And the way she lived her life set her apart. Not apart from us, but distinguished her to the church as somebody who was to be recognized and declared holy. What does it mean to be humble? What does it mean to be holy? It means to be humble. It means to be rich towards God. It means to be rich towards one another. Do not accumulate for yourself something in barns and silos. And when you have plenty, do not store it up even more by tearing down your barns and building bigger. What the Lord blesses you with is meant to be shared. What the Lord blesses you with is a heart that is open wide and vulnerable to each other, so that you may be looked upon and say, look at those people at St. Andrew's. Look how they love one another. I want me some of that. Got to tell you, that's actually a true story. When I first encountered St. Andrew's 25 years ago, I said, look how they love each other. Gosh, they're weird. I want me some of that. That is what drew me into the faith. Was this very group of people had no vision at that point that one day I would come back as your priest. Blame Deacon John. It's his fault. He's the one that welcomed me. That is what drew me into this community 25 years ago. Was look how they love one another. Look how rich they are towards God. That is what called me back to this community 10 and 11 years ago. It was the very vision of what we compared of a healthy, good parish was St. Andrew's. We would go places and we would say, that was a nice church that we visited, but it wasn't St. Andrew's. Richness towards God is the very thing that rooted me in my heart here in this parish. This is always the nest. This is always the place where our hearts returned because of the way you love each other, the way you belong to each other. This is what this gospel proclamation underscores. Richness towards God is something that distinguishes you as saints. You are saints in the making. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever look at the saints and think, oh, they're different from me. They're not. They're ordinary people who are extraordinary because of their humility, because of their richness towards God. Store up nothing. What is given to you is the Lord's grace, and it is meant to be shared among Christ's people. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.